disappear and come back in a half hour.
You could.
Come back anytime you want.
I will let you guys know that you have a competing meeting going on tonight with the Boston SMPTE.
Oh.
Yeah. Streaming for video engineers is what's going on there. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
And who's putting that on, John?
Well, a typical Boston SMPTE group. Hang on. I think it's Bob Lamb and
Sure.
yeah, Bob Lamb and I want to say Matt McMacken. Don't know if you know those guys, but
I know Ham. Another guy I don't know.
anyway, I'm just saying that's what's also going on in the Northeast. So, but collectively though, we're now chapters, what, 21, forgive me, I don't know the Pennsylvania sections. But it's all good.
Whiz.
Okay, I think we're going to get started. It's 5 after, close to it. Welcome everybody, and thank you for coming out tonight. Looks like a pretty good turnout. Quite a few registrants for this meeting, and it's good to see. Thought maybe everybody be getting tired of doing Zoom meetings, but I guess not. I think we do a lot better
Definitely
than we did with in-person meetings. Someday I'd love to get back to in-person meetings too. Maybe do a combination of in-person and Zoom. I'll ask you to all please mute your microphones unless you need to speak. If I do a roll call, open your mics. We'll start out with old business. I'll call the meeting to order. Start out with meeting minutes from the September meeting. Go ahead, Vinny.
Okay, meeting was called to order at 7:05 by Tom. Treasurer's report. Roy and Gary got the signatories for the accounts completed at M&T. Online access was switched over as well. Refund checks were issued to 3 vendors for the 2020 Expo. Chargebacks and forwards to the 2021 Expo were completed as needed. A motion to approve by myself, seconded by Kevin Tubbs. Motion passed. The minutes of the August meeting were read. Motion to approve by Jim Peck, seconded by Gary Hartman. Motion passed. Nothing to report in frequency coordination or certification. The next certification dates are in November. Deadline is September 21st. There will be a national webinar on fiber optics next week. The Expo, definitely canceled for 2020. The new date is 9/9/21, but this poses a problem since NAB is October 9th through October 13th of 2021. The Expo committee is looking at a move to 11/3 and 11/4. The national board will discuss this at their meeting next week. Motion to adjourn at 7:15 by Tom, seconded by Vinny. Motion passed. And the program was new products for 2020 from Wheatstone, presented by Phil Owens and Jay Tyler. Any additions, changes, corrections, vulgarities?
Guess not.
Okay.
Who would like to make the motion to accept the minutes? Please state your name when you respond.
Jim Peck, so moves to approve.
Okay, Jim, thank you. Who would like to second that? Anybody in chapter 22?
Alan, I'll second that.
Okay, great. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Say nay. Okay, we'll move on. Treasurer's report, Gary. Hello, Gary.
We can't
Gary,
hear
can you hear
Gary.
us? His mic is muted.
Hey, where'd he go?
Yeah, he's gone. Oh. He's reconnecting. There he is.
About now.
There you go.
Okay. Had to unplug the USB and start it over again. We issued a $1,000 check to the Holiday Inn as our 2021 facilities deposit. And we also issued a check for $539 and change for a 3-year renewal of our website hosting. That's about it for the treasurer's report.
And just some clarification, a $1,000 deposit. They charged us a $1,000 cancellation fee for 2020, which they generously applied to as a deposit for the 2021 show. I'll about that later. Okay. Anybody want to make a motion to accept the treasurer's report?
I'll move.
Okay. Second. Chapter 22 member, second the treasurer's report acceptance.
I second it.
Okay. All in favor, chapter 22 member, say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Okay. Accepted. Frequency coordination and certification reports, Gary.
Okay. Nothing for certification. Under frequency coordination, we received a request from the Army Frequency Spectrum Management Office in Fort Sam, Houston, asking for coordination for testing at Fort Drum, which has actually been underway since 2012, I believe. They're testing how different frequencies penetrate different kinds of structures, basically.
Anything on certification?
No, nothing on certification.
Okay. All right. We'll move on. New business. We'd like to welcome Dean as our newest member to Chapter 22. Welcome, Dean. Notes from John Pori. SBE annual membership meeting and national awards presentation is available for viewing. I did watch it. It was decent. Really nice production, well put together. 68 minutes in length and packs a lot into a quick moving program. You can go onto the SBE homepage and there's a link right there for it. Virtualization, how it applies to your infrastructure, will be presented October 29th, tomorrow at 2 p.m. by Eric Sheldon, Senior Systems Administrator for Hope Media Group in Houston, Texas. And Eric describes virtualization, how you can choose what's right for your infrastructure. And normal fees apply, $62 for SBE members, free for Member Plus members, and $92 for non-members. You can go to the sbe.org/education site to register for that. And our own Alan Jurison from Chapter 22 will be presenting nationally on November 18th, 2 p.m. That's the same day as our SBE meeting, chapter meeting. It'll be 7 p.m. in the evening. Nolan is supposed to come up with a topic for that. I think he has somebody lined up. More to come on that. Just keep checking the website and I'll send an email blast out about that. But if you got a chance, 2 o'clock on the 18th, check out Alan's presentation, HD radio streamlined and redefined 4th generation hardware. And that's a free one. So take advantage of that. Moving on to Expo business. We rescheduled the show from October 29th to November 4th due to the NAB rescheduling their show to early October, it being too close to our scheduled show. Exhibitors seem to be okay with that November 4th date. SBE National will not attend in 2021 due to the proximity to NAB. The board members wouldn't be able to travel from work twice within a month's period. But they did verbally commit to 2022, and they will also help us with 2021, and I'm trying to find what John sent me about that. In 2021, they will provide one SBE national speaker for expo sessions on the 4th. They will staff the booth with 2 people from national, and they provide mailing list support for the chapter promotion to exhibitors and attendees, and they will promote it in Signal. So that's where we are with that. We received a revised contract from Holiday Inn this week, and we have several concerns. Officers discussed it today. We're concerned about their COVID-19 restrictions of limiting attendance to 50 people, including exhibitors. That would be less than the number of exhibitors we have, so that's not going to work. Expected revenue and penalties for canceling have to be addressed as well. So I'm coming up with a letter to send back to them, and negotiate a revised contract. Hopefully they'll come to some kind of an agreement before our next meeting in November. And if there's anything anybody would like to discuss, now is the time to do it. Anything we've talked about so far, or any other new business you'd like to discuss, open your mic and go ahead. Nothing? Somebody's got to have something. Guess not.
I'll just put down crickets in the minutes.
Future speakers for SBE in
Yes.
starting next year. Are you all booked up for this year?
No, and Stephanie usually handles that, but he's been tied up with repack. So I've been, last minute when he hasn't come through, I've been grabbing whoever I can. He did say he's got somebody lined up for November. After that, I don't believe we have anybody for December now.
Okay. Let's have a conversation.
Sure. Sure, we can loop in Nolan and see when he wants to get back into this. He was going to have somebody for October, but they didn't come through for him, and we managed to move on from there. So, anybody else? That's it. Then who would like to make a motion to close the business meeting?
So moved. Gary.
Gary, who would like to second that?
I'll move, Alan.
Okay. All in favor? Chapter 22 members say aye.
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 Opposed? Say no. Say nay. And move on from there. So we welcome Kirk Karnak, Senior Systems Consultant, TELUS Alliance, presenting Broadcasting from Home. Vinny and I happened to catch this presentation. We did for the New York City chapter a few weeks back, and we thought it was pretty good and thought it'd be a great fit for our meeting tonight. So we welcome Kirk and thank you for taking the time to do this for us, Kirk. And Vinny will share screen, and it's all yours.
All right, good deal. Let's see if when I get permission to share my screen, I will do so here. And let's see. Interestingly, it's not usually there's an option to optimize screen share for video clip, but that is grayed out. Any idea why that might be, Vinny?
I don't know.
Okay, I've never seen it grayed out before. So
Let me see here. I don't see it in the advanced options, so I don't know.
Okay. Well, we'll share it. I do have some video clips. We'll see how bad they are. I am sharing my computer sound.
I wonder if it's because I wonder if it's because it's being recorded. I don't know the answer to that question. It's just something that might be different.
So you're seeing a whole tab, including the tab part of the browser, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry about that. I'm not sure if I can change that. I'd rather not show the tab. I'd rather just show full screen, but it doesn't look like it's going to let me do that. Let me try one more thing. Let me try that. You know, I've done a lot of these webinars on Zoom, and there just seems to be very little. You can do 1,000 things right and maybe almost get there, but it's still never. It's still never quite what you wanted. Let me look at advanced and see if there's anything in there. Portion of screen. I can share a portion of a screen. Let's see if it'll let me do that. If I move that portion over to there and drag
There
it.
we go.
Well, let's see if it's not going to let me. Oh, maybe I can make the screen smaller. There we go. How's that look?
That's better.
You seeing that? You seeing that? Okay.
I do.
All right. Cool. All right.
Interestingly about Zoom, somebody hacked into a New Hartford classroom session Zoom meeting yesterday and started putting up porn
Oh, wow.
to grade school kids. Nice, huh?
That's good.
Yeah. Nice.
Nice of them.
Jeez.
Where are they when we're meeting?
Oh, now there is the let's see, there is the full screen option in the presentation.
Browser.
So you know what? Let me try this one more time. You know, someday I'm going to hit upon the right combination of how to get this done, and it's going to be glorious when that happens. And then I'll need to write it down right away because it's kind of like Edison inventing the light bulb. There's actually 10,000 ways to do it wrong. So let's try this again. We'll share the presenter view, and then let's try full screening it over on my monitor too. Yeah. And now let's try sharing the screen again, but it still won't let me optimize for video. And let's try going to there.
There you go.
Hey,
Now you
does
probably-
anybody else here seem like they're watching Bob Ross doing some artwork?
We're watching.
We
the
got
kid
we
play
got
a video
we got
game.
some pretty little flowers over there.
Thanks. And I'm gonna guess you're
Awesome
seeing.
voice work, Kurt. Awesome.
I'm guessing you're seeing kind of a black space top and bottom of the shared screen, right? You're not seeing a real 16 by 9. You're seeing more of a square with a 16 by 9.
but it's fine.
Okay.
It looks fine.
Well, you know, I'd like it to be perfect because
Well,
there's some combination in that 10,000 that allows it to be perfect. I'm sure there is.
mm-hmm.
All right. We've titled this Accelerating Our Workflow Transformation because, you know, a lot of broadcasters were kind of headed in this direction anyway of getting flexible workflows, maybe thinking of working from home, but maybe outsourcing more things. I talked to a radio broadcaster who had already outsourced their traffic logs, and I'd never heard of that, outsourcing the traffic logs. But they had some guy in, I don't know, Dubuque, Iowa, doing their traffic logs for them. It's one less thing they had to worry about, and it seemed to be okay. So, you know, in March 2020, radio stations across the USA and indeed around the world were told to evacuate their offices and studios. They were told lockdown of businesses would last a couple of weeks, perhaps a month, in order to, flatten the curve or stop the spread. WJOL in Joliet, Illinois posted this graphic on their website in March of 2020, fully anticipating they would come back until April 1st. Well, that date has a different meaning too. Either by government suggestion or by mandate or by corporate mandate, broadcasters had about a week to plan how they would adhere to social distancing and business closure guidelines. Broadcasters were generally deemed as essential services, and as such, they were allowed to actually keep the lights on and continue broadcasting as long as people weren't forced or even asked to work in close proximity. And broadcaster engineers did what they're naturally good at, and that is coming up with solutions to the problems. They had to set up a lot of home studios or home workspaces, do it quickly, and they had to make it work. Now, there seemed as many solutions as there are engineers to execute them, and we're going to meet some of those engineers, a station owner as well, and learn about their solutions to the challenges that they faced. We're going to see how their solutions, how their station's individual needs varied and how the equipment and workflows varied just about as much. And by the way, there is a bit of TV in here. My friend Gibson Pritchard, who's the chief engineer for WTVF Channel 5 here in Nashville, is one of the people I got to interview. Now, on the one hand, setting up a home studio is pretty simple. You got a mic, a preamp, a USB converter, a laptop computer, and a good internet connection. All that can suffice just fine to do a lot of things. Such a setup can work for remote control of the automation, for voice tracking, and even for real-time live audio, provided your internet connection is adequate for that. And we found out plenty of engineers thought that they had enough people working from home who didn't have good enough internet, so they just did a lot of voice tracking. You can also build a portable studio setup that'll work most anywhere. A setup like this one shields the mic from echoes and other ambient noise for a good quality voice. So you can do it in that much space. Other stations set up a complete shop in someone's home. Small stations, this was often the station owner. Here is Reef FM in the Caribbean. The owner just plucked a bunch of gear from the radio station probably, or from his mobile DJ setup, and built studio at home. Now, between myself and the Telos Alliance support team, we spoke with, and we met online with literally hundreds of engineers and other radio professionals over a couple of 3 weeks in March and into April. Telos support assisted with remote operations, including codec configuration, advice on IP networking, firewall issues, and we shared some ideas to help broadcasters get on the air from temporary home studios. So we're about to hear from a dozen or so different broadcast engineers here in the next 45 minutes or so. Some of their experiences will likely mimic your own. There are, however, a couple of surprises, as well as some excellent advice born out of clever solutions to the problems that they faced. Now, we asked engineers, you're about to meet 3 questions. Were temporary solutions okay for the long term? Have we found better techniques for home broadcasting? And what about next time? What about COVID-20? So we're going to share their answers with you now without a lot of introduction. Hold on to your hats, and maybe you want to take a note or two. This is Chris Tobin. You might know him as my co-host on This Week in Radio Tech. He's the engineer at WBGO in Newark, New Jersey, in the New York City market. He makes their bug out of WBGO sound easy. I know a lot of work went into that move, though, a lot of quick work, but their efforts paid off with listeners.
Well, the impact to us was actually minimal. We moved everyone off-site, all the announcers. The music continues to play. They continue to produce it. It's voice-tracked. We're using a lot of remote access materials. So as far as the workflow, the only difference is we're not physically together in the building. Otherwise, everything else is as it has been. I know that because we have many listeners, many members who have written to us asking how we're rotating announcers through the building with this pandemic situation back in March. And we explained to them that we're not. They're doing it from home. Every response from the 200 emails was, wow, I had no idea that you were not even in the building. So I'm thinking that was our best way of measuring our success to getting off site in less than 6 days and getting everybody up and running as if we never left.
By the way, how'd that video look? Was it okay? Then you're the video expert. Okay, good. And you're hearing the audio okay, right? Okay, good. All right.
All good.
Thanks. This is Ted Johnson. He explains what the in-studio producers are doing at his radio station, how they're vital to the station's format, and he laments one function that especially requires the show producers to come into the studio. By the way, Ted owns a sports talk station here in Nashville, and actually Ted was the manager of the first radio station that I ever worked at, the first commercial station that I ever worked at. He was also the morning jock at WSM Radio back in the days when they didn't always play country music. They were a full-service AC station at that time. Here's Ted.
Screen the phone calls. They communicate with the host at home, set up their interviews. When they've got coaches, they track down the coach and get them on for them. And, they're doing a lot. Plus, they chop up interviews and segments and the full hour and post them on social media. Everything we do is either chopped into interviews with the talent and their guests, or their whole hour goes up on social media. You and I have talked in the past about virtual studios and doing it off the cloud and everything else. All of that we could have done except for the phone situation. And I haven't found a good solution to being able to remote control, answer, screen, and do everything on a phone call for when you're doing it at home all by yourself.
Paul Montoya is at Wyoming Public Media, and he's doing a morning show from home. He further explains how the air staff and reporters are handling their work.
And into April, everybody was so freaked out and staying at home that, we were doing probably 90% of any of the on-air stuff from home, including even live shows. The most live shows now are typically done in studio, but, we have all the processes. Typically, nobody in studio with someone else while they're on the air. Even with interviews, if we had to have an interview, like we had primaries and there might have been two people in the studio, we had to have the plexiglass shield. Things that, you just don't ever think are going to be something necessary in radio broadcasting. We've got a unique situation in that we've got 4 audio channels, 4 different audio formats that we use at Wyoming Public Radio. We have the main channel, Wyoming Public Radio. It's the NPR News. We have 9 reporters, so we had to take that into consideration, how they were going to operate. Some of the reporters, though, already were operating remotely. We're a pretty large state, so we have a few that are scattered around, and they were automatically self-isolated from the very beginning.
Charlie Wooten is Regional Director of Engineering at iHeartMedia in Florida. He's based in Panama City, Florida. They got hit by Hurricane Michael a few years ago, and they're going to get wet again. So after some initial difficulty, they found one really creative solution for a multi-person remotely done morning show, but they still need board operators to run their old legacy audio consoles.
We've found some novel ways to do some things, still requiring a board operator for a morning show. We don't have newer consoles in the smaller market where we could IP into the console and operate it remotely. So we're having to have a board op, but at the same time we're able to have guests and we're able to have multiple people on the show, not in the control room, but it's worked out very well. And we're using, believe it or not, we're using Microsoft Teams. And I am amazed at the audio quality of Microsoft Teams. We're using it. Everybody has a iRig. I don't know if you're familiar with those.
Sure. Yeah.
And they plug it into their phone, and that way they have return audio, and they have a decent microphone. And we have found that these things work amazingly well with on an iPhone or an Android device with Microsoft Teams back to the studio with a desktop in the studio with Microsoft Teams loaded on it and feeding the board, and then the board feeding a mix minus back out to the other people. And
this is Chris Tarr. He's a director of engineering for Magnum Media. Now, he's explaining how voice tracking is providing the best audio quality for their homebound air talent.
Well, essentially, we use Simian for our automation system, and they have a remote voice tracking package. So what we've done is set up our trackers or our announcers with an RE20 microphone, a DBX mic processor, and a Focusrite interface to hook up to their computers. And they can see what's coming up in the hour, and a lot of them will basically just maybe look an hour ahead and drop the tracks in. However, they've also been known to, they maybe do an hour ahead, but then change it. Something happens or news breaks or the weather changes or something like that, and they jump back in and update their voice tracks.
Chris Tobin details the home setup that WBGO provided to its air staff and why home voice tracking is also the best option for them rather than live from home.
The home setup is a laptop provided by the station, so I have control of what's in it, what's on it. I don't have to worry about them sharing it with their family needs. That was the first thing we did. So they have 2 laptops at home. They're personal. They do whatever they want with it. And then ours, which is for pretty much broadcast. So that's the first step. Second step was a USB microphone that we felt had the sonic quality representative of what we normally sound like. So as we discovered, it was transparent to the audience. And the second thing after that were a pair of headphones of their choosing, so they choose their own. And that's it. The software is VPN software to the studio servers to get certain things. We have audio automation. The server automation has a VPN client built into it, so everything is remoted. The only heavy lifting is them putting on a pair of headphones and talking to the microphone. Everything else is done at our studio facilities in the server rack room.
This is Gary Morrill. A lot of you know Gary. He's a regional engineering director at Alpha Media. His stations were already working on diversified operations, right? Including some work from home. But with voice tracking being a predominant workflow, Gary says the COVID response just moved their plans into action a lot faster. Okay. Hello, Google servers.
We haven't made a lot of changes. We were in pretty good shape to be able to do what needed to happen when all this happened. We just didn't know the timeline was going to be so compressed. But we were at that time, and I think you and I talked about this, we were one of the early adopters for Wide Orbit's 4.0 software. And so that has built-in remote capability on it. And so we were able to put that to task. And, you know, primarily all we needed to do was be able to set up some individual logins so we could do VPNs and be able to give people access both through their laptops and through, in this case, Wide Orbit 4.0 works off of an iPad very nicely. It's an easy to use interface. They can control the station. They can add stuff on the fly. They can even do stuff in the background and just load audio into that.
Josh Bone is an Alabama-based contract engineer and consultant. Now, he says their first effort to go with live codec-delivered audio from multiple locations was troublesome, but eventually found a good solution.
Initially, the setup for my major client was, here, let's grab all the tie line gear that we have and send it out with the jocks and let them do their shows on it from home. And that was all just set up, you know, that's designed for remotes. It's used, you know, once or twice a week, and you've just got a port open for it. Not that big a deal. But that was something that was a less than ideal solution, especially for our multi-person morning show. And we played with a couple of different conferencing apps. We ended up trying one, but we could never really get the mix minus right. And then what we ultimately ended up doing was setting up a Cradlepoint mesh VPN using all the MaxConnect routers that the customer has. And we sent some home with the customers, and we were able to set that up so they plug their Cradlepoint in, the MaxConnect, you know, lights up, gets them on the LTE network, and then the VPN mesh puts itself together so they can carry that to wherever they are, whether they want to do it from their bedroom, their kitchen, if they want to go to their neighbor's house, if they want to sit on their back deck, they plug it in and it puts them on that VPN. Then they can connect their codec directly to the studio end, and we have all the mix minuses set up. So that's working well, and that's far more secure than constantly relying on just an open port. That's been the main thing that we've done to secure our stuff.
Now, Paul Montoya is on again. He describes remote live control at Wyoming public media programs using their Axia Fusion consoles.
We're set up now for any of the live functions where we have a Fusion console, and we actually can remote control the console using soft surface, and that's been a godsend. Just being able to do things like that on a spur of the moment, if we have to go live with anything, not having to go to the studio. I would say something like that could continue into the future, because in times where we don't have anybody at the studio and something comes up, you can actually go live from just about anywhere.
Paul goes on to remind us of a time-honored technique, the double-ender recording technique that works even better with today's smartphone technology. I never would have thought of this.
You know, a lot of people don't know that they have a recorder built in their phone, and if they're doing an interview, they just ask the person, well, hit your record button on your recorder on your phone, and then when we're done, just send me the interview, and then they naturally match it up. They do a time sync and match it up for the interview. So people are being very creative. I would say, though, that the main drawback is more social rather than technical.
Now, Rob Bertrand is the Chief Technology Officer at WAMU-FM in Washington, D.C. He credits the flexibility and utility of audio over IP technology, which WAMU is all about that, to allow 100% remote operations of their rather complex news and talk format.
I think it's really a testament to the flexibility of audio over IP technology that we have been able to stand up in just a very rapid amount of time, stand up an entire radio station that is operating completely remotely, 100% remotely, with nobody in the building on a regular basis. And that would not have been possible without audio over IP and without the flexibility of routing platforms like Pathfinder and the ability to build custom panels and deploy that throughout our staff. We've really appreciated what we've gotten out of these platforms that do so much for us on a daily basis while we're in the studio. It's been pretty amazing to see them be able to deliver a whole new life for all of us working from home.
Rob goes on to describe how WAMU's producers are using remote routing capabilities in their Axia Livewire network to get guests and callers ready to go on the air, and they're doing this remotely from their homes.
The biggest challenge to booking all these guests remotely is actually just managing that audio. So we have somebody whose full-time job it is right now to test with every guest in advance of the show the day before or a couple of days before, and then actually manage those connections in the course of the show. And that has continued to work out pretty well for us. One of our talk shows, we have brought largely in-house. The host and the engineer are in-house. The line producer continues to function remotely. All of her phone screening continues to happen remotely, as does social media screening. So that's sort of a hybrid. And then we have another show that is being produced entirely remotely still. And we haven't changed too much since we launched this initially. We've tweaked a couple of things along the way. One of the interesting things in public media is the sort of the staple of the fundraising campaign. And we've done one. We're about to go into our next fundraising campaign. And we're used to bringing parading staff through the studio when we're there in the building. And we are using audio over IP to do that remote contribution of all the different people who will pitch during the fundraising campaign throughout the station, and have built some custom panels using Pathfinder in Axia to be able to communicate with all of those folks and let the producers talk to different people in their ear. And it's really been pretty fascinating doing that, especially not using hard codecs at people's homes, and instead using these software codecs in smartphones.
So one of the conclusions that I came up with after interviewing different engineers about, what did you learn, what have you learned during COVID operations, is that we were really kind of ready for this, but we didn't really know it. A lot of stations had most of the stuff that they needed. The mics, headphones, they'd scrounge stuff from their remote kit. I got a couple of phone calls myself from local Nashville radio stations saying, hey, do you have a mic we could borrow? Do you have some extra headphones? Do you have a Zip One? And then the IT equipment, of course, this is kind of ubiquitous. It's everywhere, although there certainly have been some changes made. In fact, that's coming up. We have at the TV station at Channel 5, as I mentioned earlier, we have Gibson Pritchard here. He's Director of Engineering at WTVF, the CBS affiliate here in Nashville. Now, they made some quick changes to help get their at-home editors, graphics designers, photogs with the best configurations to get their work done. But they also had to reconfigure their main studio internet and their VPN access away from their corporate standard way of doing things in order to actually handle the workload that they had to handle. Here's Gibson.
When we saw the pandemic coming and we recognized we needed to get people out of the building, we pretty much equipped everyone with the same set of hardware and software. Mostly they were repurposed desktops or new laptops, depending on what their needs were. We put video editing software on their computers, as well as infrastructure software like FTP clients, so they could get their video back into the station so it could air. What we decided in pretty short order, what we found was we had two categories of people. We had editors who were primarily working with content that was already in the building, meaning it was network content or it was content that was shot by somebody else and existed in our central repository. And we had people, primarily like photographers, who were shooting their own content, had a camera, go out and shoot their own content. And for them, most of their content was local. It was not already in the TV station. It was there with them and their camera. So we decided that the people who were editing other people's content really just needed a VPN connection to edit remotely using the hardware, the software and hardware that was already in our building. Primarily using Microsoft Windows Remote Desktop, they could edit using the systems in our building. That meant that they did not need super powerful computers or a whole lot of software on their end at their home. For those who were shooting, who had cameras and were out shooting, they needed editing software on their computers, and then they were sending the finished or final product back to the station. One of the things that we did to sort of cope with those obvious bandwidth needs were that we changed our VPN model. Previously, everyone connected through a centralized VPN located at our corporate office, and then came back over a wide area network to the station. We added a local VPN appliance so that it would save the time in terms of the number of hops over the internet, plus it would reduce bandwidth constraints at the corporate office. It was a real cost-effective way to do it, but it also meant that we were able to leverage people's local connections coming straight to the station, and it's proven very effective. So far, it's worked very, very well.
Well, once remote talent and sales and management and back office employees were set up at home, a lot of them are finding the situation to kind of be okay. Some are liking it more than others, but to a large degree, humans do want to interact in person. And we wonder what a return to the workplace might end up looking like. Well, Gary Morrill reminds us that localism really is more of an attitude than a physical location, and the use of technology itself doesn't determine a station's commitment to its community.
Got that situation now where they eliminated the main studio rule, and I've heard people that, you know, there's this whole discussion about some people going, oh my God, you know, it's the ruin of radio, and I'm going, well, only if you make it so, because if you choose to hyperactively go out into your market and you're where things are happening, it's just the opposite. So it's just how people think.
Gary goes on to remind us how many stations operated with a showcase studio where the public could see, and they may not have actually been at the main studio. Remember, there were plenty of small towns, big towns, medium towns, where the main studio was somewhere, and they had a showcase studio downtown, maybe in a hotel. Anyway, he wants us to think about going back to that model.
Back in the day, radio stations were often located outside of the city limits, but they had some kind of a showplace studio where they originated programming and stuff from. And of course, back then you had to have enough room to, you know, for the grand piano and the orchestra and everything else. We don't quite need that today, but I think we may be coming around full circle to where you may find people putting that in and having some kind of a showplace studio where when they do their live segments and when they're interacting with people in the market, you know, the people that are making it happen in their towns, that's where they would gravitate to, because, you know, everybody's looking at this and going, I think we need to re-examine how we do everything.
Josh Bone thinks that large and small markets may end up taking very different approaches to in-studio versus remote talent. And part of that difference is a real disparity in the talent available, that is the IT talent, and their ability to implement sophisticated technology.
You know, big groups are going to handle it differently than local stations. Local stations typically have local talent, and they will bring them back in just because, you know, all this remote stuff is overwhelming for a small station. It's taxing the often limited resources that they already have. But for the bigger groups, I can see an instance where you have a board op or a producer in the studio. Everybody else is coming in on some type of a codec or some other SIP connection, which in the age of HD voice and high efficiency codecs that use small amounts of bandwidth, I could see it staying that way, because you can use a teleconferencing app like Zoom or Blue Jeans or something like that, where all the hosts can still see and interact with each other. Then that may have an unintended benefit in some cases, where you can let people who you would want to put on a station in, let's say, major market, we'll use DC as an example. Somebody in DC decides, okay, they want to hire this person. That person doesn't want to move. That, they're in Iowa or whatever. Okay, fine. We'll put you on and you get to be on a big market station live from your home in Iowa. There's also an unintended consequence there of, okay, you can find somebody in Iowa, say, hey, I'm going to hire you to put you on my station remotely. And then they only pay you what the salary for Iowa would be instead of the salary for DC, and you don't get any of the perks of actually being in DC. So there are a lot of different ways that I could see this going, but I think we will overall as an industry see a lot more remote operation, because now that the main studio rule is gone and we've seen, hey, it can be done. I think that's going to happen. From a fiscal responsibility, if you can save money, sure. I mean, sucks for the personnel in the industry, but that is the unfortunate direction, or fortunate direction, depending on how you look at it, that our industry has gone. It's, but efficiencies have killed the personality of radio, but the quality of the product as far as delivery and overall availability has gone up because of that same technology. So it's very much a slippery slope.
Now, producing topical and timely and fast-paced news and talk shows is probably best done in person. Rob Bertrand explains that particular dynamic.
In this news talk environment, I think that everybody's really anxious to get back into the building. Does it mean that we might do a little bit more remote work? For example, we've been able to demonstrate that remote phone screening and remote social media screening is pretty easy to do once we stood it up. I could see people, alternating working from home on certain days. The hosts really do like to be in the studio. Everybody's really anxious to bring guests back into the studio too. However, one thing that we spent a lot of time on, particularly here in the realm of public media, up until COVID, was that, always wanting to have the highest fidelity audio that we could. We spent a lot of time booking studios in far-flung cities for remote guests to go and join. And at this point, everybody's kind of gotten used to the sound of soft IP codecs. And I think that's going to be a big change, is that I don't see us booking studios so much for remote guests in the future. For guests who are here in Washington, I do think that we will continue to bring them into the studio when that's possible. Everybody's really missing not being able to have that point of connection across the table. But I think that we'll probably stop booking studios remotely because that's proven to be unnecessary.
As you might guess, social media has really come to the fore through all this. Ted Johnson isn't expecting big changes when his staff and talent return to the main studio. He does point out that social media has become critically important to his little standalone AM sports talk station.
Before COVID and after COVID, I don't think we're going to see a whole lot of difference in the audience that's there. I think it's going to be a little harder for us to attract new audience, because so many people being at home and not doing their normal routines in the day have discovered other forms of entertainment, just like Netflix is running rampant. And I'm sure that there's also a lot of listening to the internet. I do notice that our social media in COVID has just exploded. The numbers that we have on our Twitter accounts and our Facebook accounts and our SoundCloud, all of that is very competitive with the biggest sports station in this market.
One of the biggest challenges we've heard, remote call screening, being able to talk a lot of people and asking how to handle broadcast phones remotely. So we'll talk here about the ideal way to do this, and a lot of folks are just not aware of, as well as some other methods that may be better due to certain challenges. Okay, that's kind of vague. Let's just take a look at the challenges here. Why are we even talking about this? Well, two reasons. The first is stylistic. The phones are still crucial for listener interaction. For contesting, for talk shows, for bits. Listener phone calls are important content that can't directly be replaced well with any other medium. There are other communications methods, all these little apps you have on your phone, but there's such a big variety of them that the phone is still pretty ubiquitous. The second reason that we're talking about is technical, in that an added layer of complexity to be able to take phone calls. You're essentially adding another duplex audio path in addition to your main duplex path that you may need for getting audio on the air. So bottom line is we can do this already if you've got some of the right stuff. If you're using a modern talk show system, it's really just another network connection to get this done. Here's a couple of different phone screening softwares, and these work primarily with Telos on-air phone systems. But both of these, one of them is from Neo Group on the right, and the one on the left is from Broadcast Bionics. And both of these allow you to get the caller audio onto the computer that's at the studio, and then you can remote desktop into that and have remote two-way audio with that software, and hence with that caller. That's one way to get it done. Another way to get it done is to actually call into one of the fixed hybrids that you may have in your talk show system. So I'm the producer, I call in, I get auto answered onto a fixed hybrid, and then I use a panel like this one that works with Telos's Pathfinder software to connect me, disconnect me, reconnect me to other different hybrids where I have callers that are being screened. So all this can happen over the VPN, the client VPN back to the producer's home, wherever he's working from. So this is one way. There's some complexity to set it up, but this is what they did at WAMU. They made these panels pretty quickly in software. They're HTML5 panels, so they just had to be VPN'd in and then hit the right URL, and they could then select different hybrids to talk to, different people to talk to, push to talk, and of course have a clock there, a time of day clock. If you don't have enough codecs in your building, well, one codec that's available in at least in one Telos talk show system is the G722 codec. This is typically referred to as HD voice in the telephone business. It is 7.5 kilohertz, so it's not bad to listen to for voice. And this is already built into the Telos VX system. Well, you can get a soft phone app like Acrobits or Bria, and you can put that on your soft phone. You can make your soft phone then to be an extension off of the SIP PBX at your radio station or TV station, and now you have a 7.5 kilohertz path into your phone system and hence onto the air. So you can have remote guests, hosts, calling in this way. This way does in fact need that app. So that is a bit of a complexity, and it typically would end up getting registered as an extension. Now there's another way to screen calls. You can do a call transfer like this, or actually a better way to show this is like this. Let's say that you have a phone producer or a call screener at home. You would have all your calls actually routed to a home SIP phone, whether it be a wired phone, wired to the internet, a SIP client, or whether it be a SIP client on a smartphone. And then you would screen the calls on your cell phone and then re-forward that call back into the system to put it on the air. That's all doable, and that's how some stations are handling this right now. I got to believe that in the future we're going to see some more simplified systems, but that's what you see on the screen is what a number of stations did when they just physically couldn't get into the station. So finally, we asked engineers, okay, how are things going to be different for COVID-20? What would be your wish list? What would you like to see manufacturers come out with in terms of equipment or systems, software you can buy, purchase, or use? And how would you get ready for the next pandemic or other reason why you can't be in the studio? Chris Tarr says that he's been planning with one of his colleagues to plan for off-site broadcast infrastructure. Here's Chris.
Very smart tech guy. He and I have been talking about Amazon Web Services to do things like, can we put our automation in the cloud? Can we do some of this stuff where, we don't have to duplicate services from building to building to building to building? Is there a place where we can centralize that? We've also been working on connecting all of our markets together through VPNs. If there's a wish list, it's just the ability to kind of decentralize but centralize, I guess is the best way to put that. Can we, put our stuff somewhere where it's easy to manage and accessible to everybody, but, can we get it away from having it in a building somewhere? Can we host these things on the cloud and still be able to kind of push that out to a radio station? If vendors can get together and really start working on effective cloud solutions for broadcast, and that goes for, consoles, audio mixing, playout systems, all of those sorts of things, because internet is becoming easier and easier to get at transmitter sites. I went from half of our sites to having internet now to all of them. Through various either IP radios or cellular connections or those sorts of things. So really, audio delivery to the transmitter sites isn't really the issue now. It's having something that's easy to use and, really reliable for 24/7 broadcast use.
Meanwhile, Chris Tobin expresses the view that it's really critical to have options to the traditional radio control room for the next time.
Where we're going is, I think, better understanding of what we do as storytellers and the technologies available. I think IP connectivity is probably going to be the best approach. The trick is understanding how to apply it to your workflow. So I would say virtual consoles, absolutely in the future. Why not have it? Why not have the virtual console with you on location? You're doing an outside broadcast, you're at an OB event. Why not have the announcer or DJ or talk show host control their console from there? Okay, so you don't hire a board op because it's not necessary. You have some other means. It minimizes the what if or the conditions of, oh my goodness, the building is in trouble because there's a chemical fire down the block. Water main break. We have to evacuate the neighborhood because of chemical spill. Guess what? Bob, who's your uncle, can go home, sit down, log in, and continue his show. That is the goal. And that's where we're at right now, and we're going to build on that. So I'm looking forward to the next couple of months.
Consultant and contractor Ed Bucant notes that the AES 67 standard for AOIP, for him, is absolutely the key to the interoperation of different broadcast systems, whether they're in the cloud or local. He's also excited that today's IP intercom systems like the Telos Infinity can not only provide comms along with production staff and talent, but also it can serve as actually the audio path for on-air contribution audio.
AES 67 is very quickly becoming the way audio is being shared between whoever. That company in Cleveland that we love has this wonderful product that does intercom over AES 67. So the intercom is now essentially full quality audio. Why do I have to have parallel networks for intercom and program? If the intercom is being shared by everybody, can I run some of my program and other interconnect over my intercom service, which is now actually a savings rather than having parallel networks? So the methods that we're using are going to redefine how we do production. We can't keep taking the analog model or even the older digital models and expecting them to work.
Well, IP connectivity, of course, is critical. I think we're getting that. Having redundancy in those connections is critical, too. And here's Gary to explain.
This whole world becomes so much easier if we have the connectivity available to have a good, solid primary and a backup means of connecting. I mean, you and I both know that a lot of our technology is going to go to the cloud in the next few years, and that can be a great cost savings in a small market situation, rather than go out and spend six figures on a bunch of hardware, wondering if and when you're ever going to see a return on that investment. If you go cloud and you go with software as a service, it becomes a little bit easier to handle in those smaller markets.
Josh Bone has remote control audio consoles on his wish list, and more on that after Josh talks, as I've got a nice surprise for you. And he describes what he'd like to see in such products.
We've already got very efficient audio over IP infrastructure that can be used in a local facility. So, Axia, WheatNet have demonstrated that very admirably over the years. I think that in order to effectively do all of this, to have a remote control surface that will be able to send signaling messages back to the mothership system. So say your Axia network is, sitting back at your studio and you have a remote personality who's a key person and you don't want to have anybody in the studio. If there were to be a true remote surface, everybody has their little glass surfaces or some kind of a remote surface where you can bring it up on a touch screen or a regular screen or whatever, but some sort of a tactile remote surface where when you turn a fader up and down, it sends a signaling message via TCP or UDP back to the studio to control that channel in that mixer for that air chain, where you can literally have talent running a board from their house. When they push the button to turn the mic on, it turns the mic on and it sends the audio stream of that mic back to the studio, but the automation can still continue to be centralized at the station. So if their connection drops, you don't actually go off the air. They may lose the ability to continue a live shift in that manner. But overall, because look, we've got all the codec technology now, whether it's with a Zip or a Tie-Line or a Comrex or whatever. We've got all the codec technology to get the audio back and forth. The signaling and the complex routing and handling all of that remotely in a way that people are comfortable with, currently. And this could change in a year. I mean, I know people that swore, oh, I'll never run a board on a touchscreen. And they've been doing it for the last 6 months. And they're like, this is awesome. So things change over time.
Yeah. Remote-friendly broadcast solutions consist of combining technologies from the IT world and the broadcast world, and that's how we got AOIP networks in the first place. Rob Bertrand describes what we've done thus far, and where he'd like to see us go next.
You know, we've cobbled so many things together to make that happen. And, you know, in my fantasy world, it would be amazing to combine the video conferencing power of Zoom or Microsoft Teams and something like the screening capability of Broadcast Bionics, as well as that point-to-point audio routing that I've talked about that we're doing in the VX. And that's all happened for us at WAMU with some custom engineering and some custom-built workflows. And I know that everybody's facing this and tackling it a little bit differently. I've heard from other colleagues in public radio, and it's been interesting to hear what they have done to cobble this together. These needs are sort of universal when it comes to talk programming. So it would be interesting to see a consolidated product that would allow a show team to be able to see each other and hear each other, as well as communicate with callers and other field contributors. Is that something that is reasonable to be created in the relatively small scale of the broadcast industry? I'm not sure. I'm sure that, you know, people like your company will be the ones to make that determination if there's a real business model there for it. With that said, it has been powerful to be able to leverage off-the-shelf technology in cobbling these things together to bring a solution that makes sense for us.
Shane Toven has experience in really every aspect of radio broadcast engineering, and now he's the senior broadcast engineer at Educational Media Foundation, K-Love and Air One. He talks about simpler interoperability as his hot button for more powerful and complete remote operations.
So I think focusing on integration of various components is probably a key part of it. I mean, we have all of these tools, but a lot of times those tools are really not aware of one another. Like, for instance, automation systems. Boy, wouldn't it be great if your automation system already had a codec built in? You could dial into that. You could go live. You could, you could do all that stuff. I mean, we know about remote voice tracking. That's not new. That's been around for a long time. So that was really kind of old hat to people, implementing that during COVID. But yeah, being able to actually have that connection of being, of feeling like you're right there in the studio and having your co-hosts there with you. I think that's one thing that's kind of lacking. I mean, I could speak for what I heard on the air while we were doing a lot of that around here. It was mostly seamless to the listeners, but I know that it took a lot of work to get there, and there could have been a lot of streamlining done in terms of various software components, especially in the automation, to kind of make that a little easier.
We're just about to the end of the presentation here. I want to remind you that it was always a dream of Steve Church, the founder of Telos, to have interoperability. It was his dream that, hey, look, so many things have an Ethernet connection on them. Why don't we make them talk to each other? And the AOIP solutions back in 1999 weren't really appropriate for what we do in broadcast, and that's why he himself, along with a couple of people from Telos and from the University of Riga, invented what is today Livewire, and then what required very little change to become AES 67. So the book Audio over IP by Steve Church and Skip Peasy, it's still mostly up to date and quite a good read. The Axia soft surface is a proven way to control existing Axia Fusion or Element consoles. Paul Montoya mentioned this earlier in one of his interview clips, and that's what the Axia soft surface looks like. That's actually been around for 6 or 7 years now. I got to tell you, it's not a great remote solution. It works best on the same LAN, but then you could remote desktop into the computer that is running it inside the broadcast facility. But this is kind of cool. This is the new Axia IQ-S, as in IQ software. It's a new audio mixing and control system. The hardware at the moment is a networked mix engine. We call it the AE1000, loaded with the IQ-S software. and this enables remote access via a web browser. It's HTML5, and you license it by the number of faders that you need. If you, during sports season, if you need more faders, you just license more faders, and pay for them for the however long the season lasts. I've been playing with this myself. We have a demo system set up at Telos right now for employee use only, and it is really, really slick. Actually, come to think of it, we are shipping this. So it's the AE1000 and the IQS software together. One thing we discovered, you notice the big orange bars there on the screen. We discovered that, there's no reason just to have a little knob that you have to get your finger to hit. It's okay to have the whole fader area or a large part of it be the part you can touch. And so you can touch anywhere on the orange bar there and move the fader up and down. You can also double tap the fader. It'll go directly to 0 dB, to zero gain. So that's kind of slick too. So we've been playing with that. And also we will at some point be incorporating a audio codec capability, either in this or right alongside it, so you can truly go from home with just from your browser. This is the IP intercom that was talked about before. So there's no central matrix. There's not a bunch of parallel wiring to make this work. This is the Telos Infinity. It is literally distributed intelligence. So the bigger the system gets, the more audio renderers that it has. And it knows how to just choose which panel is in the background going to render your group talk, your party line. There's all different ways you can operate intercom systems, and rather than have to program all those different ways and different groups into a central matrix, this actually assigns those tasks moment by moment out to different pieces of hardware in the system. It's really pretty cool. Even the belt packs can actually do rendering. Even the belt packs and these panels can actually have codecs in them. They can do an Opus codec, and so to let you have communications with, say, a remote truck or a facility across the country or halfway around the world, literally over public internet. So we can get those pathways going that way. There's one other thing that's pretty new to Telos that is actually works really well, and that is our new Telos help area at support.telosalliance.com. And our support guys, over the last couple of years, they've been collecting the most common questions that they get. I think close to 400 of them now. And they've written these articles about how to do it. So if you want to understand, how do I set up remote call screening software so I can actually screen calls from home? You type in a plain language question in that orange bar there, the search bar, and it's pretty good about giving you the selection of articles that we've written. So even things like some people have noticed that the Chrome browser has become a little bit incompatible with some of our hardware devices that have a web server in them. And Chrome browser added some features that broke some of the web pages that we had. And there's an easy fix. You go into Chrome browser and you uncheck something and bam, it all works again. So sometimes even I have to be reminded of, what is that I'm supposed to uncheck? And I just go to support.telosalliance.com and ask the question, Chrome browser, and it pops right up top of the list. So it's if you don't want to wait on hold or wait for an email reply, try going to support.telosalliance.com, ask your question in plain language, and you might be very, very surprised at the quality of the answer. Keep in touch. There's our information, and you all know the website, telosalliance.com. Is everybody asleep yet? How many snoozers do we have? Okay.
For the most part, everybody stayed with us too, which is great.
Awesome. Oh, good deal. Good deal.
We lost two.
I'm happy to field any questions you might have right now, but hopefully I did such a great job of explaining everything, you don't have any questions.
I think it shows how many different solutions people came up with out of thin air, in a matter of 2 or 3 weeks, trying to get everyone out of the building. And I'm sure we've got a lot of those stories on the TV side too. And the phones things are really interesting, because now that we're operating like this in a long-term period, obviously for like Rob Bertrand's station, WAMU, and it's all talk, and that's all they do all the time. So they had to get phones. Phones was the number one priority, but on music stations, that was kind of like a we were just so happy to get everyone out in the field, back, working from home. Now what do we do about phones? So we're having lots of those types of conversations, and some of those products you showed are very good ways to do it. But I really think, as kind of Rob Bertrand kind of teased, having a cloud-based conferencing system that ties in both broadcasts, both the talent and your guests, whether they be direct contributors or phone calls. Having a cloud-based solution for that is something I think both TV and radio could use. So,
naturally, being an engineer and part owner, I'm part owner of 14 radio stations. I own the part that doesn't make any money, so that's why I work for Telos. But we have 10 stations in Mississippi and Arkansas, and then we have one station on the island of Kauai in Hawaii, and then we have 3 stations in American Samoa. And the Samoan stations actually make a little bit of money because the business owners in Samoa haven't yet figured out that radio advertising doesn't work, tongue in cheek. So they still spend money on it. But in seriousness, where was I going with that? Oh yeah. In Mississippi, man, I'm so tired of trying to maintain racks of computers. We got away from purpose-built hardware like cart machines and turntables and reel-to-reel machines, put everything into computers and that are perfectly capable of doing a great job of all that, except, hard drives die, fans die, power supplies die, and at the local level, I don't have the money or the expertise to back all that kind of stuff up in any kind of N+1 failover situations. I just don't have the time, knowledge, or cycles to do all that. So we have a lot of individual computers. We've done some virtualization, and that's fine until that hardware dies, and then you've lost 6 things instead of 1. So I would much rather, if we could afford it, I'd much rather pay somebody else who's really good at servers and uptime and reliability, and if this one fails within milliseconds, it's failed over to something else, and I would much rather do that. And on my This Week in Radio Tech show tomorrow, I'll be interviewing Dave Brierley Jones, who heads up a little company out of England called Playout One. They make a radio automation system. And sure, there are other automations too that are now geared for cloud operation. Playout One is one of those, and it's a pretty low priced, not free, but low priced automation system. And we're going to be going to that at some of our stations locally at first, and someday we plan to put those in a cloud operation. Well, easy codec back and forth. Now, of course, you could put FM processing and AM processing in a cloud situation. We've offered that for a few years at Telos Omnia. Let's see, Hans von Zutphen and Leif Clayson have offered that for some years. Now we've got Omnia 9 processing, which is really, really world-class stuff, available to run in the cloud or on your own server, including stream processing and even streaming and coding, and even FM stereo generation, and then going out over the internet through micro MPX. So at 500 kilobits per second, you can deliver a super clean FM spectrum baseband to a transmitter site over IP. And you can do it over multiple paths with packet replacement at the far end, if that's needed. So, you don't miss it. If you miss a packet, guess what? It's coming in on the other spigot. So, we're getting so close to be able to do all this in the cloud. The one question in my mind, and maybe some of you are more expert at this, is how do we handle EAS? Do you keep an EAS box at the transmitter site and remote control it? Or do you maybe stream your listening assignments back up to your cloud server and have an EAS box in the cloud as well? DASDEC is already running on Linux. Why couldn't you just virtualize that? I haven't talked to any EAS manufacturers myself yet, but I think that's an interesting conversation. And then we already have the Telos VX system is now available as a VM, so you can run a whole phone system on a VM. You can also run our iPort codecs will soon be available as a VM. So the whole intercom system will be available as apps on your computer or on your phone, as well as the hardware. So it's getting hard to think of stuff that you can't do in the cloud. You could put all that together and have your whole operation there. Are people comfortable with that? You know, when I asked that at my own local SBE chapter, about a year and a half ago, I asked that question, and we had the usual covey of naysayers who said things like, we can't get good internet at the studio, let alone the transmitter site. That's not going to work. So, I don't know. I'm pretty enthused about it, even though my internet in Mississippi isn't perfect. We do have a trade with a wireless ISP. You know, we have towers. They need towers. They have internet. We need internet. Works out to be a good trade to get a wireless ISP to my transmitter sites. Any thoughts or comments before we go?
I think one of the things that we're going to see related to connectivity in the next 5 years is obviously a lot of people are familiar with 5G networks that are coming up in the phones that are available. That's going to be helpful. But the other thing is I don't know if people are aware of it, but the SpaceX Starlink system, low orbiting satellite internet is really positioned well to help us in this situation, and that's honestly an area we're looking at very heavily into as it gets rolled out. That can work for radio and TV and personal home connections that have never had broadband and things of that nature. And the pricing, at least for consumer plans, they've already announced that is very, very in line with what everyone already pays for at the house.
I think I just saw $100 a month or $99 as a first introductory price.
Yeah.
Don't know how I don't know what kind of price will be up or down on that.
I think it's a 100 service. So.
Really?
Yeah,
wow.
That's what I think. The proof will be in the pudding when it's available. And interestingly enough, I don't know if you've seen their rollout plan, but they're starting at the top of the globe and they're working down, basically more rural locations. So like places like the U.S.-Canada border and things like that are going to get it first. We're actually in one of their earlier areas as opposed to if you're down south. I guess they must have done the math and they've got to launch satellites and they put them all in order. I don't know what their process is, but you can sign up on their website. You can put your lat long in there, and they'll email you when it's available in your area. So that might be worth playing around with. I already did that with the most northern location that I have access to that has no internet access to play around with. So
that's got to be great for rural transmitter sites where even 4G and 5G may not be great. So that's going to be interesting. I've got one station in Indianola, Mississippi, and I swear our DSL comes in on the top two barbed wires of the fence down the road. It's awful. And we have a wireless ISP. And we actually I still haven't set up the router to switch between them automatically, but we run on one until it gets stupid. And then we switch, the manager goes back to the room and moves one cable to the router to the other, and we're back on AT&T versus what we call BobbyNet. A guy named Bobby owns the wireless ISP. And we use it until it fails. And we switch back to AT&T and back and forth.
Another idea related to LTE, if you have LTE service in the area, but it just doesn't work very well at the site, you can get LTE modems that have external antenna connections to them, and we've done a lot of that. Put like a 10 dB Yagi on it, and actually dial it in and actually get really good service. And another thing we've done to really get really close to like 5 nines of reliability is at some of these sites that actually have good LTE is dual redundant LTE. So you do AT&T and Verizon, and guess what? None of them both have the same bad day on the same bad day. So we've really started doing that in some of these places where we were chasing after cable modems and DSL modems, and or trying to deal with some sort of expensive satellite internet, and it goes out when there's a cloud over the site. There's lots of challenges, but I think in the next 5 years we're going to see a lot of those challenges and the price points to use them come down.
I've had some good luck also with that 4G LTE service from Josh Bone, one of the interviewees, called Max Connect. It's not fast. We typically get about 5 megs up and down, but basically every packet gets there, and you're not contending with other people because you have a higher priority than anybody
Oh
else.
yeah,
So
I've heard of it. I've not used it, but
you can literally be in a stadium full of people at halftime, and you got 5 meg up and down the whole time. Everybody else is opening their phones and posting the score and pictures and Facebook and all that. And it actually does work. We actually did an SBE national meeting in Las Vegas, and on my T-Mobile service, I was getting 15 megs up and down. We used it. We tried using it though, and we had a lot of packet loss. And I guess as soon as T-Mobile figures out that you're not doing a speed test, then they they don't help you out too much. But the Max Connect service was just a solid, rock solid. So when I go out on the road and do my TWIRT show, and Chris Tobin is on the road half the shows, we're using the Max Connect, and it's very reliable. There's a couple places where it's not, and we can switch. We don't have packet switching, but we can switch between Verizon and AT&T by doing a card switch internally. So,
lots of cool things out there. Probably a lot more to come too.
I think as broadcasters, we're benefiting from the rest of the world making demands, and hey, no, we want internet in lots of places, and the financial incentives to do that. So, the good news is we get better connectivity. The bad news is everybody gets that connectivity, and so there's more broadcasters than ever before, right? Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed chatting with you guys. Alan, good to see you, and good to see you, Vinny, and everybody else. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Kirk.
Thank you, Kirk, and
thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you everybody for coming out tonight, and expect to see you on November 18th. Don't forget to check out Alan Jurison's webinar on the 18th at 2 p.m. Go to the national website, and you can find that there.
Super.
All right. Thank you very much.
Everyone.
Thanks, guys.
See you guys.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Good night.
Good night.